Biden just got caught in the most devastating way possible. Secret recordings have been uncovered that expose years of lies, contradictions, and deliberate deception about everything from his policies to his personal conduct. This isn't some partisan spin or creative interpretation of ambiguous statements. We're talking about actual audio recordings of Biden saying things that directly contradict his public positions and prove he's been systematically lying to the American people about issues that matter most. Hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss any of the videos I release covering these explosive revelations. So what exactly is on these recordings, and why are political analysts saying this could be the smoking gun that destroys what's left of Biden's credibility? According to sources who have reviewed the recordings obtained by investigative journalists on February 13th, the audio includes private conversations Biden had with advisors, donors, and political allies where he candidly admits his public statements are dishonest and his actual positions differ dramatically from what he tells voters. These aren't vague conversations that could be interpreted different ways. These are explicit admissions that Biden knowingly lies to the public while privately acknowledging the truth to people he trusts. This is sending shockwaves through Washington because it confirms what critics have long suspected but couldn't prove, that Biden is a serial liar who will say anything publicly to maintain power while privately operating based on completely different principles and priorities. When secret recordings capture a president admitting he deliberately deceives the public on major policy issues, you know the entire foundation of his credibility has been destroyed. It's honestly hard to believe we're watching direct evidence emerge that proves Biden has spent his entire presidency lying to Americans about his real agenda, his mental fitness, his family's business dealings, and virtually every other issue where he's faced criticism. Here's the full picture of what these secret recordings reveal about Biden's pattern of deliberate deception. The first major area involves Biden's mental fitness and cognitive decline. In public, Biden and his team have consistently dismissed concerns about his age and mental acuity, claiming he's sharp, engaged, and fully capable of handling presidential responsibilities. The recordings include conversations where Biden himself acknowledges his cognitive struggles, admits he forgets things constantly, and discusses with staff how to manage his limitations and hide them from the public and media. One particularly damaging recording captures Biden telling an advisor that he knows he's declining and that his team needs to keep his schedule light and avoid unscripted situations where his mental lapses become obvious. He explicitly states that the public can't know about the extent of his problems because it would destroy confidence in his presidency and hand ammunition to Republicans. This is an admission that Biden has been deliberately hiding his cognitive decline while lying to the American people about his fitness for office. The deception isn't just political spin, it's a coordinated effort to conceal information voters have a right to know when evaluating whether their president can do the job. Smash that like button if this is making sense so far, and you can see how devastating these recordings are. Here's where it really gets damaging and the lies become undeniable. The second area exposed by the recordings involves Biden's economic policies and his private acknowledgement that his agenda is causing the inflation and economic pain Americans are experiencing. In public, Biden has blamed inflation on COVID supply chains, corporate greed, and Putin's invasion of Ukraine, while claiming his policies are actually helping the economy. The recordings include conversations where Biden admits to advisors that his massive spending programs and energy policies are driving inflation and that he knew this would happen but pursued the policies anyway for political reasons. One recording captures Biden discussing with economic advisors that his student loan forgiveness plans and other spending initiatives will worsen inflation, but that he needs to deliver for progressive voters regardless of economic consequences. He explicitly acknowledges the tension between good economics and good politics, then chooses politics over economics while lying to the public about the trade-offs. Another conversation includes Biden admitting that restricting fossil fuel production drives up energy costs for families, but that climate activists demand these policies and he can't cross them even if it hurts working families. The recordings prove Biden understands his policies cause the economic problems Americans face, but lies about it to avoid political accountability. Let's be honest for a moment. Every politician spins their record and emphasizes favorable interpretations of their decisions, but there's a difference between political spin and outright lying about fundamental realities. Biden isn't just emphasizing the positive aspects of his record. He's explicitly denying that his policies cause problems he privately admits they cause. He's blaming external factors for inflation he privately acknowledges his own policies created. That's not spin, that's systematic deception designed to avoid accountability for policy choices that harm Americans while serving Biden's political interests. Drop a comment right now with your thoughts on whether Biden should be impeached for deliberately lying to the American people about issues this important. I read every single one. Now, things get absolutely wild when you examine what the recordings reveal about Biden's family business dealings and the extent of his personal involvement. In public, Biden has consistently claimed he never discussed business with Hunter, never met with Hunter's business associates, and had no involvement in or knowledge of his family's foreign business activities. The recordings include multiple conversations that directly contradict these denials and prove Biden was deeply involved in and aware of his family's business dealings. One recording captures Biden discussing with an advisor how to handle questions about Hunter's laptop and business dealings, with Biden acknowledging that he met with Hunter's business partners and understood the arrangements but needs to maintain plausible deniability. He explicitly discusses coordinating his denials with Hunter's story to ensure they don't contradict each other in ways that prove they're lying. Another conversation includes Biden worrying about evidence that could emerge proving his involvement and strategizing about how to dismiss it as Russian disinformation or partisan attacks, even if the evidence is authentic. Perhaps most damaging is a recording where Biden discusses with a family member the financial benefits they've received from Hunter's business activities and how important it is to keep those benefits hidden from public scrutiny. He acknowledges that voters would be outraged if they knew the Biden family profited from foreign governments seeking influence, which is why they've constructed layers of shell companies and intermediaries to obscure the money trail. This is an explicit admission that Biden has been lying about his family's business dealings and has actively worked to conceal information from voters and investigators. The fourth area involves Biden's positions on policy issues, where he's completely reversed his public stance from what he privately believed or promised to supporters. The recordings include conversations where Biden tells progressive activists he supports policies like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, and wealth taxes that he publicly claims to oppose or not fully endorse. He explicitly tells these activists that his public moderation is tactical and that he'll pursue their agenda once elected but needs to avoid alienating moderate voters during campaigns. Then there are recordings where he tells moderate donors and swing state voters the exact opposite, promising he'll resist progressive pressure and govern as a centrist even though his private commitments suggest otherwise. The bombshell moment in these recordings comes when Biden is caught explicitly discussing his strategy of telling different groups whatever they want to hear, while planning to govern based on whichever faction has more political power after the election. He literally describes his approach as strategic ambiguity, where he never commits to specific positions publicly, but makes private promises to everyone. The cynicism is breathtaking, and the recordings prove Biden views voters as marks to be manipulated, rather than citizens deserving honest information about what he actually believes and plans to do if elected. This move sent shockwaves through the media and forced even outlets that normally protect Biden to acknowledge the recordings appear authentic and the content is devastating. When a president is caught on tape admitting he systematically lies to the public about his mental fitness, his policy impacts, his family's corruption, and his actual political positions, there's no defending it or spinning it away. The evidence is direct, clear, and impossible to dismiss as taken out of context or misinterpreted. Biden's credibility is destroyed and his entire presidency is exposed as built on lies from the very beginning. This isn't the first time Biden has been caught in significant lies that undermine his credibility. Think back to his plagiarism scandals in the 1980s that destroyed his first presidential campaign and showed a pattern of dishonesty about his record and achievements. Then there were the lies about his academic performance, his civil rights activism, and other biographical details that he fabricated to make himself appear more accomplished and heroic than reality justified. The pattern of dishonesty isn't new, but these recordings prove Biden never changed and has spent his presidency lying on an even larger scale about even more important issues. Then there were Biden's lies during the 2020 campaign about Hunter's laptop being Russian disinformation when he knew it was authentic. The lies about never discussing business with Hunter when evidence showed he met with business associates. The lies about not knowing about Hunter's activities when communications proved he was kept informed. Every time evidence emerged contradicting Biden's denials, he maintained the lies and relied on media allies to dismiss the evidence rather than admitting the truth. The recordings now prove that Biden's denials were conscious lies rather than mistaken recollections or differences in interpretation. Subscribe immediately if you haven't yet, because these recordings are just the beginning, and more evidence of Biden's lies is likely to emerge. And let's not forget that Biden has consistently attacked his critics as liars and conspiracy theorists, spreading disinformation even when those critics were telling the truth about his conduct. The recordings show Biden knew the critics were right but chose to lie and attack them anyway, rather than acknowledge uncomfortable truths. The projection and gaslighting are hallmarks of Biden's entire political career, but now there's undeniable proof that validates what honest observers have been saying all along. Now the pattern becomes crystal clear, and Biden's entire public persona is revealed as fraudulent. He claimed to be the honest alternative to Trump when he was actually even more dishonest in more consequential ways. He claimed transparency about his family's business when he was actively concealing corruption. He claimed to be mentally sharp when he knew he was declining and hiding it from voters. He claimed his policies would help Americans when he knew they'd cause economic pain. Every major claim Biden has made is contradicted by his own words in these recordings, proving systematic dishonesty at a scale that should disqualify him from office. So what led to these recordings being made and ultimately leaked to investigators and journalists? According to sources, the recordings were made by individuals close to Biden who became concerned about his dishonesty and wanted documentation of what he was really saying and thinking. Some recordings come from staff members who attended meetings and recorded them for note-taking purposes or to protect themselves if Biden later denied what was said. Other recordings come from individuals who deliberately recorded Biden because they suspected he was lying and wanted evidence of his actual positions and admissions. The combination of routine recordings and deliberate documentation created an extensive record of Biden's private statements that contradict his public lies. Here's the kicker that should alarm every American, regardless of political party. These recordings don't just expose Biden's lies, they reveal a president who views the American people with contempt and believes he can say whatever serves his political interest without any obligation to truth or consistency. Biden doesn't just lie occasionally when politically convenient. He operates from a foundation of dishonesty where truth is irrelevant and only political advantage matters. That fundamental corruption of character makes him unfit for office, regardless of any specific policy positions or political affiliation. Don't go anywhere, because the most explosive part is coming next, involving specific recordings and exactly what Biden admitted. And here's what should terrify anyone who cares about honest government and democratic accountability. The recordings include conversations where Biden discusses how to manipulate media coverage, coordinate with friendly journalists to suppress negative stories, and use intelligence agencies to give credibility to false narratives he wants the public to believe. This goes beyond normal political spin into active corruption of democratic institutions and processes. Biden isn't just lying to voters, he's weaponizing government powers and media influence to make his lies impossible for voters to see through. One recording captures Biden discussing how to get intelligence officials to sign letters claiming Hunter's laptop is Russian disinformation even though they know it's authentic. He explicitly describes the strategy of using their authority and credentials to mislead the public and give media outlets justification for suppressing the story. Another conversation includes Biden coordinating with media allies about how to frame negative stories about his administration and which talking points to emphasize to minimize political damage. The level of coordination between Biden and supposedly independent media outlets proves the media isn't reporting on Biden, they're working with him to manage public perception. This puts Biden in legal jeopardy beyond just political damage to his credibility. When recordings prove a president deliberately lied about matters under investigation, used government resources to suppress information, and coordinated to mislead investigators and the public, it suggests potential obstruction of justice and other criminal conduct. Legal experts reviewing the recordings have identified multiple statements that could support criminal investigations into Biden's conduct related to his family's business dealings, his handling of classified documents, and his efforts to interfere with investigations. Political analysts are calling these recordings potentially fatal to Biden's presidency and re-election prospects. A Democrat strategist admitted privately that the recordings are devastating because they're in Biden's own voice, admitting things that destroy every defense Democrats have offered for his conduct. The strategist acknowledged there's no way to spin or dismiss recordings of Biden explicitly admitting he's lying to the public about fundamental issues. While the strategist still predicted Biden would try to survive, the concern was evident that these recordings could be the scandal that finally breaks through Biden's media protection and forces accountability. A Republican strategist called the recordings a political nuclear weapon that exposes Biden's fundamental dishonesty in ways that will devastate his support among moderate voters who believed his promises to restore honesty and integrity after Trump. The strategist noted that Biden's entire 2020 campaign was built on claiming moral superiority and trustworthiness, so proof that he's been lying all along destroys the foundation of his political appeal and makes him more dishonest than the president he claimed to be replacing. Do me a favor and slam that like button because it genuinely helps this video reach more people who need to hear these recordings and understand the extent of Biden's dishonesty. Even some liberal commentators who've defended Biden admitted the recordings are extremely problematic and raise questions about whether he can be trusted to tell the truth about anything. They acknowledge that having a president who knowingly and repeatedly lies to the public about major issues is corrosive to democracy, regardless of which party he represents. While stopping short of calling for resignation, they conceded Biden owes the public explanations and apologies for the dishonesty exposed in the recordings. So let's break down what this means for Biden's presidency in the 2024 election. First, the immediate impact is that Biden's credibility is completely destroyed among voters who aren't purely partisan. Moderate and independent voters who believe Biden was fundamentally honest now have proof he's been systematically lying about the issues they care about most. His approval ratings will likely crater further as the content of the recordings becomes widely known. His re-election campaign must now defend against the charge that everything Biden says is a lie, an almost impossible task when recordings prove the charge is accurate. Second, it creates massive vulnerabilities for Democrats defending Biden's record and policies. How do you campaign on a president's achievements when recordings prove he admits his policies cause the problems Americans are experiencing? How do you defend his honesty when he's caught lying about his family's corruption? How do you attack Republican opponents as dishonest when your own president's lies are documented in his own voice? Democrats face an impossible situation where defending Biden requires ignoring or dismissing evidence that voters can hear with their own ears. Finally, looking at broader implications, these recordings validate concerns about Biden that media and Democrats dismissed as conspiracy theories or partisan attacks. Critics who said Biden was lying about his mental fitness, his family's business dealings, and his policy impacts are now vindicated. The gaslighting and dismissal they faced while trying to get the truth out is exposed as Democrats and media deliberately covering for Biden's dishonesty. The damage to institutional credibility extends far beyond Biden personally and affects trust in media, intelligence agencies, and Democratic Party leadership who all participated in concealing Biden's lies. Drop a comment below with your prediction for whether Biden survives this scandal or whether it finally forces him to resign or drop out of the race. I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts. But beyond the immediate political implications, this is really about whether American democracy can function when presidents feel free to systematically lie to voters about fundamental issues and weaponize institutions to conceal their dishonesty. Biden's recorded admissions prove he views deception as a legitimate political tool rather than a betrayal of public trust. That fundamental contempt for truth and democratic accountability disqualifies him from leadership regardless of any policy positions or political considerations. This scenario is causing sheer panic within the White House and among Biden's political team. Reports indicate that Biden's lawyers are scrambling to challenge the authenticity of the recordings and threatening legal action against media outlets that publish them. But multiple audio experts have authenticated the recordings and confirmed Biden's voice, making it nearly impossible to claim they're fabricated or AI-generated deepfakes. The defensive reaction and threats only confirm that Biden knows the recordings are authentic and has no substantive defense for what they reveal. Meanwhile, Biden's base and progressive activists are divided between those who dismiss the recordings as edited or taken out of context and those who feel betrayed that Biden lied about positions they cared about. Social media shows sharp divisions, with some progressives defending Biden regardless of evidence, while others express anger that he lied to them about his policy commitments and used them for political support while planning to govern differently. The erosion of trust, even among Biden's core supporters, suggests the damage may be impossible to contain or repair. Things escalated further when Biden attempted to address the recordings in a brief statement, claiming they're either fabricated or that his statements were taken out of context and don't mean what they clearly appear to mean. The nonspecific denials and refusal to address the actual content of the recordings did nothing to rebuild credibility and only reinforced the impression that Biden can't defend his conduct and is hoping to outlast the scandal through denials and media support. The weak response made things worse by confirming Biden has no convincing explanation for why he's caught admitting things that contradict his public statements. Stay with me, because what comes next will completely change how you understand Biden's entire presidency and whether anything he's ever said can be believed. Here's what makes these recordings even more devastating and politically lethal. They don't just expose current lies. They include conversations spanning years that prove Biden has been dishonest throughout his political career about everything from his civil rights record to his Senate votes to his vice presidential actions to his campaign promises. The pattern of dishonesty isn't recent or limited to his presidency. It's how Biden has operated his entire career, and these recordings finally provide undeniable proof that his critics were right all along. Legal experts immediately recognize the historical scope as dramatically increasing the political and potentially legal damage. If Biden has been lying for decades about fundamental aspects of his record and positions, it means his entire political career has been built on deception, and voters have never been given accurate information about who he really is and what he actually believes. Everything Biden has accomplished becomes suspect when achieved through lies about his intentions, positions, and the likely consequences of his actions. This goes far beyond one scandal or one president. Biden's exposure reveals how easily politicians can systematically deceive voters when media outlets and party leadership choose to protect them rather than hold them accountable. If a president can lie repeatedly about critical issues while media dismisses evidence and attacks critics as conspiracy theorists, it means the accountability systems democracy depends on have completely broken down. Biden's lies succeeded for years because institutions that should expose dishonesty instead concealed it, and that institutional failure is more dangerous than any individual politician's dishonesty. If this blows your mind, hit that like button right now, because the implications truly are extraordinary. Here's the current situation as it stands. Secret recordings have exposed Biden lying systematically about his mental fitness, his policy impacts, his family's corruption, and his actual political positions. The recordings are authenticated as genuine and in Biden's own voice. His defenses have been weak and non-credible. His political support is eroding, including among progressives who feel betrayed. Democrats defending Biden face impossible challenges explaining away evidence voters can hear directly. Biden's credibility is destroyed among moderate voters. The recordings validate years of criticism that was dismissed as conspiracy theories. Legal experts see potential criminal exposure in some of Biden's recorded admissions. Biden's presidency is exposed as built on lies from the beginning. His re-election prospects are cratered as voters realize they can't trust anything he says. This isn't just another political scandal that fades with the next news cycle. These recordings provide permanent documentation of Biden's dishonesty in his own voice, admitting things that destroy his credibility and prove his critics right. The damage is irreversible because the evidence is undeniable and preserved for anyone to verify. Biden can't talk his way out of his own recorded admissions, and no amount of media spin can make voters unhear what Biden said in unguarded moments when he thought he could be honest about his deceptions. What happens next will show whether Biden tries to survive through denial and deflection or whether the weight of evidence finally forces accountability. But the secret recordings are public, Biden's lies are exposed, And what he doesn't want you to know is that he's been systematically deceiving the American people about everything that matters while privately admitting the truth to allies he thought he could trust. The exposure is complete, the damage is catastrophic, and Biden's presidency may never recover from the revelation that it was built on lies from the very beginning. Pause for a second and hit that like button if you're finding value in this coverage and believe Biden must be held accountable for dishonesty that betrays the public trust and corrupts democratic accountability.